Once upon a time, in a military camp not so far away, a cook came down with a nasty fever. It was March 4th, 1918, when the so-called Spanish flu is said to have spread from farm animals in Haskell County, Kansas, to the young men at Fort Riley who were drafted for World War I.
They were literally dealing with an incredible number of dead young men.
The widely accepted claim that it all started right here in Kansas, killing between 50 and 100 million people around the globe.
Is this the end of times?
But everything we think we know could be wrong. Historian Jed Dunham has dedicated his life to researching history's mysteries. He says we're looking at the Spanish flu all wrong. He claims that it wasn't just one flu, but a series of different flus, and they didn't start in Kansas at all.
That first spring wave seemed to be just a normal bout of seasonal flu. You know, a lot of people got sick, not too many people died. But then in the summer, something happened where it was different.
That difference, he says, killed 12 K-Staters. Some of their names here on this plaque memorializing students who died during World War I.
Desperately sick for several days, and then a secondary bacterial pneumonia was often what the cause of death was. So going back with a scientific understanding into 1918, we were looking for death rates where pneumonia was a cause.
In the summer of 1918, Dunham says pandemic influenza broke out in Sierra Leone, France, and Boston. He claims ships and people involved with World War I spread the illness from country to country, and that the epicenter can be traced back to the border of not the U.S., but Switzerland.
My belief is that you go back to Switzerland, June, July 1918, you look at kilometer zero up near Basel, that's where it began.
That's a theory Fort Riley Museum curator Robert Smith has heard before, but he calls it just that, a theory. He says there are several, but one thing is for certain: the 1918 influenza was prolific in Fort Riley.
Four horsemen of the apocalypse. We have war, we have famine, and we also have disease.
This is a memorial for the World War I soldiers that were trained here at Camp Funston. At one point, they were kept in such tight quarters that the flu spread like wildfire.
And there's a fear that you see even in the local newspapers in Manhattan, Kansas. You have schools closing.
But as it spread, he says healthcare professionals began to understand it better and better. Large gatherings were outlawed. People could go to jail for holding a church service. Nurses started separating soldiers' bunks with bed sheets, but even that wasn't a quick fix. Soldiers weren't the only ones that died of this illness. There are countless accounts from nurses themselves trying to help others fight this disease, only to fall victim to it themselves. The deaths, a concern hanging over our heads now as COVID-19 spreads and even looms over our stock market. But today, things are a lot different than they were more than 100 years ago.
Of course, now we understand it better. We have hygiene things we can recommend. We have vaccines. So back then we didn't understand all this. We didn't have as good a knowledge of how these viruses work.
Or the need for quarantine. But now we do. Thanks in part to the pandemic of 1918 and the millions who were impacted by it.
Each one of these numbers, each one of these statistics had a very real human story behind it.
Jessica Crawford, Cake News Investigates.